Well, I was born and brought up in Boston, Charlestown, Massachusetts. Went to grammar school, St. Francis de Sales in Charlestown, Mass. Then I went to the high school. I went to Boston College for about a year, high school for a year. Then I finished it up at Commerce High School. I played all the sports and so forth.
Can you talk a little bit about your family?
Yes, I got one brother. He was a Navy chief, and he died. That's the only family that I have left.
Can you talk about you going into the war?
Time going into the military, because it's so different today. When the foreign people hit our shores in Pearl Harbor, there was a high school in our town, and there was a federal building in Boston. And the distance between people enlisting probably was as far as you put your leg. And that was around the clock for about 3 days, around the clock to enlist into the service. And it got so that when you went to enlist, you'd be there for a day, and they'd give you a ticket with a number on it, and the number, the next day, you give them the number, and you get back in line that way. So it was 2 days before I enlisted in the Navy. 2 days before I could get in, even to see the physicians. So that was the start of the going into the Navy anyway.
Can you talk a little bit about your training?
We didn't have the training that we should have had, in my opinion, that the kids, I hope, are getting today. First time I went to boot camp was in Newport, Rhode Island. And we get shipped out of what they call a C unit, and it made me kind of sick when I shipped me after about 60 days altogether, different phases of boot camp. It made me kind of sick when I saw my first ship. They put you in after your boot training, they put you into what they call a C unit. And that's where the higher-uppers say, I need so many men for the electrical course, I need so many men for the gunnery course, so many men. That's where they got their crews, from the C unit.
Where were some places you went?
The best stop I think I made was in Reykjavik, Iceland. The people up there were very, very courteous to us and so forth. Then I came back to, after that stop in that port, come back then to Newport, Rhode Island. And in Newport, Rhode Island, and before that, let me say that I said to myself, I took an oath that I would never go on a ship that was going up the North Atlantic again. That was my, that's how rough the waters get up that way. Anybody that's a sailor will tell you that. But to come back to Newport, Rhode Island, and there was a sign up that we're back to the base, and there was a sign up, new ship, volunteers. And when I saw that, and my remembrance of the North Atlantic, I was, I think, one of the first ones over to the new ship, going to get on the new ship, which had turned out to be an LSM. And I went through LSM training. They sent LSM training down at Newport, Rhode Island. That's you learn your seamanship, all your flags and so forth and so on. And we had a crew of 58 men, 4 officers and the rest the crew. And we had the officers we had were 2 people that had been in, one was in the service 30 years. He was a commander, and he had just got away from Pearl Harbor and was wounded, and also got the Silver Star for going into sick bay to save a soul at that particular time.
Can you talk about your ship sinking?
At general quarters, one night, I'm on the mid-watch, and he's got the officer of the deck. That's up in the corner of the ship. And he said to me, Kelly, he said, this is 2 o'clock in the morning now, all right? He says, Kelly, he says, I want to sound man overboard, starboard quarter. And, you know, when he said that to me, I figured, you know, something hit him in the head. You know, it was kind of, go 2 o'clock in the morning, you're going to go general quarters, number 1. So sure enough, got the dummy all rigged up. I threw the thing overboard, starboard bow, starboard quarter. And we searched for 1.5 hours, searching to pick up. He wouldn't stop searching until he picked up that life jacket. He wanted the men to know that no matter what happened, if they followed the orders properly, that they'd be all right. And a lot of people hated him, and I had a dislike for him in a way, because he was his rate in the Navy was a bosun mate, and I was a bosun mate, first-class bosun mate, and it kind of got to me, you know what I mean? So anyway, you got to so no matter what happened, and if you didn't have your top thing tied here, there's a string on each side of the K-Park life jacket that goes underneath your chin, and that's supposed to be tied when you go up on the general quarter station. That is so when you hit the water, that keeps your chin up out of the water from drowning. That was part of the thing. But he would have them kind of drills, let me say, 3 or 4 times a week. But when things did happen, you knew why he had them drills. In other words, you went into the water, or you didn't have enough of ammunition at gun 1 or something, you know whose fault it was and so forth. He had it right down, regulation all the way, all the way. And I got a lot of mercy on him. He called me in once. I had done something. He called me in before me. He says, Kelly, he says, I'm going to make you the bosun mate that I was. And under my breath, I said, like hell you are. Because I'll tell you, one instance, just for one instance, there was I don't know if anybody had been aboard an LSM.
Can you explain what an LSM is?
It's a landing craft. Our main cargo was 4 M4 Sherman tanks. That was our main cargo. Then after you offloaded them, you went back out, brought in troops, brought in food, brought in ammunition. And it was a 158-foot vessel with a 57-foot beam. And I tell you, it done its job. And the reason that they made that vessel was the LST couldn't make the landings high and dry enough for a lot of the heavy vessels to come off of the ship. So they made the LSMs, and that's how we get it. But anyway, one instance to show you they have two super decks, then you got the main deck where the cargo is. You had one sailor, he was, I mean, I don't know if anybody here has ever been seasick. Well, let me tell you, I understand it. It's next to death. But there's a man down on the cargo deck, and I had to watch with him again up on the corner. And there's a sailor down there, I'm telling you, and all he was asking was just throw me overboard. I mean, they say that's how sick it gets you. And he said to me, "Hey, Kelly," he says, "go down and get that man up out of there. There's nothing to do it with him but his head."
Do you have any short stories about your time in the war?
It seems that we get mixed up in South Pacific down to the islands, and we were attacked by, in one convoy, we were attacked by about eight or nine kamikaze planes. They were these fighter planes, carried 500-pounders. And two of them got us. I believe that they had the pictures of them. Two of them got us. And I got thrown overboard, according to the records. I got thrown overboard, I got blown overboard rather, and I got picked up by LCI, that's a landing craft infantry, who was in the convoy at the time. Landing craft infantry put me aboard a destroyer called the Flusser, Flusser, put me aboard the Flusser. Now the Flusser was in the Gulf of Leyte at that time. That's where the battles went on. The Flusser transferred me to the AH-7, which is the Army hospital ship. And I never forget my first awakening after I wasn't wounded far enough to go into the operating room. I was just wounded enough with the ears and the shrapnel and so forth and so on. And so I went into the Army hospital ship, and I'll never forget. I was still wasn't two yet. So when I came to, I'll never forget it. I looked up when I first woke up. I woke up and it was like you know, one of them curtains on the ship, them curtains, them white curtains that you can see through. Like it was like a mesh, you know. And I looked up and I said, "I made it. I made it." And boy, did that get taken down. About that time, a nurse came down the aisle and said, "Hey, you're awake, sailor, huh?" I thought, in my mind, I made heaven.
How long were you in the water?
That's a question that, you know, probably half hour, an hour, something like that, yeah.
What saved you?
What saved me was my head not being, when you go into, I don't know if you ever used a K-Park life jacket, but you put them on, and if it's not tied at the top, your head goes down and you're drowned, you know? And these were all of these drills that this skipper of ours was putting us through that saved my life, because I had everything tied before I was picked up. And that was about the best of it.
How long were you hospitalized?
Well, that varies. Some say 6 months, some say a year. I couldn't count the days myself, really, how many days. But after that, they ship you to, where do they ship me to? Newport, Rhode Island, where I started out this escapade.
What were your duties in the war when you went to Newport, Rhode Island?
I tell you what I was assigned to. I was assigned to one of the gates. I was put into like a shore patrol outfit. I was on the gate. There was 1, 2. There was 3 gates there, and I was put on one. I had one gate, and that was my duty there.
That was 1945, Joe?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where were you when you heard the war was over?
I tell you where I was. I was in Boston. I was in Boston when it started, and I was in Boston when it ended. And that celebration was something to behold. It was not as good as, I can't say as good as the one when you were going in, but it was when you were coming out.
Is there anything you would like to say to this generation of kids?
If I had to do it over again, I would, for the greatest country in the world. And I hope these kids don't forget it. Because if they do, they're letting the world down. Letting the world down. This is the greatest country in the world. And that's why I enlisted in the Navy. Of course, I had 2 uncles that were in the Navy. That was one of the reasons. But when I joined the Navy, it just kept the tradition going, and also in their family. You know what I mean? And when I don't know what would happen today if what happened back then, that you'd get the same reception, you know what I mean, at the enlistment part, you know what I mean? I don't know if you'd get the same, but when the Jap hit Pearl Harbor, hey, you couldn't get, like I told you, you couldn't get near the receiving station to enlist. That's the way it was back then. And then why? They're taking our country away from us. They're taking our life away from us. That's what they're doing. They're trying to anyway. That's about what I can say. And I hope these kids realize that, and I hope the government realizes the training, hospitalization that they give the kids when they come back is good.